Making my
And welcome back to Open Line. Tonight we are talking about all things Metro Council. We could probably do a 4-hour show on everything going through Metro Council, but to help us navigate it all is Councilmember Joy Styles. Thank you again for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I want to ask you about this, not particularly because of what happened, but what may happen. So RNC was very much a sticking point for Metro Council, and obviously Council voted the way it did for them not to come. But now there's the question, could there be retaliation from the state legislature? And wanted to get your insight on that. What do you think will happen, and what happens if that does happen?
So the truth of the matter is, I say it's when and not if. We've already seen this. We are preempted so many times on things that are beneficial for the community, whether it's, oh, let's give tax breaks to developers to, build discounted units. And of course, we are actively working now, Councilmember Allen, on how we can do that in a different way. But many times the state just steps in and says, nope, we're good with the little guy not getting their fair share. And the fact of the matter is there were concerns. The concerns were genuine. I frankly, at this point, say we don't need to host either party, right? That just makes it safer. We're not picking sides. We're just saying now's not a good time to have a political convention, period. My concerns in regards to RNC were very much about safety. I mean, we can't ignore what's been happening across the country, what we have seen, the Proud Boys and all of those organizations. To have a conference here was going to be a beacon. Come to Nashville for a week, and there was going to be issues. So better for us not to host it and be fair and just say, and Democratic convention, we can't host you either, right? I think we're living in very different political times. If this was 10 years ago, I would be very supportive. I would have voted yes for RNC to come here. We are not that nation anymore. We are very divided. Everything is very much you're on my team or you're not on my team, and working towards the middle is something that does not often happen anymore, which is disappointing. And it's certainly a way that I like to conduct myself, which is, hey, let's figure out if we can work together first. And if the other party makes it very clear that they don't want to work together, then you have to accept that, but you still have to try and get the work done.
So with that being said, if the state can kind of hold over potential threats of retaliation, does that factor in how Metro Council should vote? It
shouldn't. We weren't elected to respond to what ifs, and I have said that numerous times. I think particularly during the pandemic, for me, I was very vocal about COVID protocol, wearing masks and making sure that we stayed socially distant. And there was a lot of pushback about what health departments should be able to do and what mandates can be put in. And at the end of the day, you have to vote for what's right. What is your conscience telling you is the right thing to do? What are constituents telling you is the right thing to do? And frankly, the medical community, in the midst of a virus, we cannot do our own personal research and come up with our own answers. We have to be listening to our medical professionals. And so I think where we are right now is standing our ground, and I'm going to vote the right way because I think it's important to let constituents know where we stand as a body and not make decisions out of fear, because if that's the case, then we don't need to serve. The goal of being a leader is to lead, not to cower.
Absolutely. I want to bring in, because I feel like this is the end-all be-all topic in many ways for Nashville, affordable housing.
Oh,
I mean, you hear people, I know I hear it as a reporter, I know you have to hear it as a council member, that people just say it is becoming harder and harder to be able to afford a mortgage, afford rent in Nashville, Tennessee. Is there anything that Metro Council can do, or is this just kind of a private sector issue that's out there?
So, as I briefly mentioned, Councilmember Allen has been working on legislation where we can provide a tax break for individuals to be able to build affordable housing. It is certainly a priority. I know many of the projects that I'm working on in my district, I'm asking people, okay, well, what can we have? Could we have some artist housing, right? We know we're Music City, USA. We have people coming here every day to try and pursue their dreams. But we literally on Metro have 75 units that are for creative housing. That doesn't make sense. So we need more housing for our creative class. We do definitively need more housing for our middle income individuals that are working but struggling to pay rent. Owning a home is wonderful. It's very hard to purchase something right now, and it's almost as hard to rent. So it is about certainly council members having conversations with developers that are proposing projects to say, okay, well, if you're interested in this, then let's talk about how much of this can be dedicated for this type of housing. And I think those are important conversations to have. And while Councilmember Allen's working on that legislation, which I think we will wholeheartedly support, because that's how we move the needle forward, right? We have to have people feeling safe where they're living, knowing where their dollars are being invested, and knowing that they can still have a life, right? It can't be I'm spending all of my money, but I can't go out on a Friday night to get something to eat or go and spend time with my friends. So it is paramount for all of us to figure out solutions. And certainly at last week's meeting, there was a deferment of the ARP funding to go towards affordable housing. There are some more questions that council members had in regards to that and using that funding for affordable housing, because we do have funds that are supposed to be community-based, and many organizations were coming to the ARP committee to ask for those funds. So we're figuring out how do we do that with what we have left. But that investment is top of the list in terms of what it is that we need to do.
Sure. I know often too, when you have conversations about places where affordable housing units can go in, you inevitably have the, well, that's a great idea, but I don't want it right next to my house, the not in my neighborhood aspect.
NIMBY.
Right. It even has its own acronym. So how do you navigate that? I know that sometimes can be on a case by case, but how do you kind of get a total buy-in from those communities?
So it's really about what is the project that you're proposing addressing? Because what you're bringing up to me sounds like transitional housing. And if someone want a transitional housing facility close to their home, those are harder conversations to have, but also mandatory conversations to have, because the truth of the matter is we do have a good portion of people that are in transition, and we have to give them a place to land on their feet or get back on their feet and be ready to move into permanent housing. So, right now, River Chase, that's a really great example to use for that, for the individuals that are that having to move out. I know Councilmember Parker has been working on that very strongly to figure out, okay, the people that have left, how do they get to come back? Do they get to come back with their vouchers because that's how they left, and come back to a brand new apartment? That's a different experience, right? And so I'm really excited to see how that pans out. And so is it going to be some transitional housing, some market rates, and how do you make that work? And I think Envision Casey is a really great example that's taking place in District 6 with Councilmember Withers, where you have multiple levels of income all living together. And in asking MDHA how that's going, they've said it's gone great, right? I think the assumption is, people that are paying market rate will want nothing to do with those that are subsidized. But the truth of the matter is, people are people. Mm-hmm. And so if you're living in a community, your concerns are the same. Everyone that's living there wants a safe place to live. Everyone wants beautification and engagement. How are you getting along with your neighbors? So all of these come into play when you're having conversations about projects, and how do you mix it up so you're providing amenities to the community, also dealing with this particular constituency group in terms of transitional housing, but then also market rate, because that's really what offsets everything. So if you say, hey, can I get 20% artist housing, and you can take the other 80 to do market rate, okay, but then can I also get downstairs, can I get a cafe, can I get a coffee shop, can I get something that's bringing something to the community? Because you can't just have an apartment building either. That is, in my area, where we have a very high percentage of rentals, I am not interested in rezoning anything for an apartment developer. Unless that's a project that's come before the community at a community meeting that says, yes, these apartments are with it, but then we're also getting a bunch of amenities that we've been missing because we've been a food and retail desert for so long. If a project can bring that, then we have to weigh that because how developers will come and invest is very much based on density. So we have to do good development. It has to be wise and be considerate of the neighbors that are there and figure out how we all work together. Everything is about how we work together versus, oh, look, I found this piece of land on Parcel Tracker. I'm going to buy it and use it for the zoning that it wants. I don't care what the neighbor's saying. Forget about it.
Right. That always causes controversy.
Exactly.
Our friend Mike is back on the line and has a question that he wants to pose. Go ahead, Mike.
Hi.
Hey, how you guys doing? Deja vu. Councilwoman Styles, I heard your answer as far as why you obviously supported the 34% property tax increase, but you say that very lightly, very casually. Do your constituents know that you supported the increase? And it's not one thing to do an increase, but such a large increase. People have big debates over 2% increase on property taxes. And just because Metro, former mayors, whoever, Dean, or whoever, all the way back to Fulton, if they didn't do do the taxes they should have, well, that's too bad. But you can't do an increment of 34%. And in the middle of the worst part, the early part of the pandemic, where people couldn't even go outside. People didn't know if they're going to be alive next week, if they were going to catch COVID. But you say that with glib like it's no big deal. Now, you've got a good job. You're well educated. You've been at Wesley College. I think that's a female college, Ivy League, pretty much, Purdue. And you're probably doing well. But most of the people who were born here in Nashville, in Tennessee, like myself, just don't have it that way. And I think you don't truly understand that, not being from Tennessee at all. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, Mike.
May I respond?
Sure, please do.
Mike, thank you very much for calling back in, and thank you for your candor and also your due diligence. That was impressive. That threw me off a bit. So I am not in any way being casual about the increase. I am very well aware that it hurt. It was a gut punch. And being on council, we all felt it as well because we were impacted by the tax increase. But again, as I said, if we had not fixed our budget, that meant the state was going to come in and the state was going to make decisions for the city. I do not think you would want that. And I appreciate your perspective of not having grown up here. Yes, I am a new Nashvilleian. I claim it 100%. But the increase was needed. How we did it, I know that it was rough, but had we waited, we could have been taken over. And even if we did a smaller increase, it would not have fixed the original problem that we had. So it wasn't just a matter of previous mayors not doing tax increases. You're talking about years of not doing it so that it had become a snowball effect. Where we are right now, and the amount ended up being, I think, $1. We voted on $1.06 ultimately with the substitute. We did go with Mendez's substitute, but it leveled us out so we could be in a better position, which is where we are now, where we have actually put money back into the reserves. We were dangerously low when we came in 2019. Despite being in a global pandemic, we have managed to get through. And as I said, there's nothing on the table right now to discuss another tax increase because the one that we did was so substantial. So the goal is to make wise decisions now, not to avoid things for the wrong reasons. As I said, you shouldn't avoid a vote because you're worried about re-election. That's not how you should serve as a leader. It's about making the right decisions for constituents and making things better. Certainly, if the pandemic hadn't happened, and Nashville was still thriving as it has been and booming, and we are still getting people moving here every day. We have a lot of Californians, we have a lot of New Yorkers that are moving here now. We have a new blend of individuals that are moving here in terms of background, in terms of education, and where the city is also heading. So I think we're in a moment of transition where it is the marriage of what exists with what's new and coming, and how do we include the new people to the existing Nashville community and that culture that everyone has grown up with, that is from here, like yourself, Mike. So our goal is to do the right thing. I I am 100% not dismissing how hard a tax increase was at all. But thank you for calling back again.
Absolutely. We're going to need to fit in one more break before we lose you. So we have one more segment with Councilwoman Styles. So if you have any more questions or comments, go ahead and call that number on your screen. We'll be back.